and thank you for coming to our Purple Team Exercise Framework workshop. My name is George Chiez, and we really appreciate you being here. The first question I always get, and someone actually already posted it, is, will this be recorded? The answer is yes. And are there slides available? And the answer is also yes. So I actually just tweeted. So if you look me up at George Chiez, you will see the slides as well as a bunch of references, right? A lot of this that we've done is not net new. We've been working on this for many, many years. So all the references are there and you can follow along. So go head over to Twitter, check out that tweet. The slides are on SlideShare. You'll see it's about 60 slides and all the references are there as well. We are covering the Purple Team Exercise Framework, so you should download that. It's a 19-page document that shows you a process for performing Purple Team exercises, which is something I've been doing for the last few years. And I recently joined Scythe to lead and be the Chief Technology Officer here, where one of my main jobs is to give back to the community, understand what our customers are looking for, how they're using our product, and really building an ecosystem of sharing of TTPs and adversary emulation techniques. So we'll cover that a little later. I did write the Purple Team Exercise Framework, so that was just released for free for the community. You should download that. Another thing I've done is I'm a co-creator with Bryson, our CEO, of the C2 Matrix. The C2 Matrix, I'll cover briefly here, only one slide, about the command and control matrix. Prior to joining Scythe, I worked at Citi for 10 years, an entire decade, exactly 10 years actually, at the end of May. And there I led the offensive security team. I started as a vulnerability assessment analyst, and then built out the pen test team, built out the red team, and then started doing some purple team functions. So a lot of experience in the financial space, and a lot of experience with regulators, given it's the largest and most global financial. For the past 10 years, I also taught for SANS, and I still teach for SANS. I'm a certified SANS instructor, teaching the pen test curriculum, Security 560, so shout out to all the GPens on the call, and Security 504, so GCIH. If you've done that, if you've taken a class with me, great job, and hopefully you found that valuable. I also am an author. I wrote a 2-day course for SANS called Security 564, Red Team Exercises and Adversary Emulation. I also wrote a book on Windows 7, an operating system you probably shouldn't be using now since it is end of life. Other contributions include the Common Vulnerability Scoring System at Citi. I was the voting member for Citi in that working group. So we released, and I was a part of CVSS version 3 and 3.1. And since leaving Citi, I can no longer be a voting member there, but I am working on something interesting called the Exploit Predictability Scoring System. So here we're trying not to, use CVSS, but kind of complement it into what will most likely be exploited, working with a great group of people. If this interests you, it's a working group, so you can come and participate in that as well. As part of the financial institutions, I worked with the Global Financial Markets Association and SIFMA, writing a framework for threat-led penetration testing. See, what happened was, being a global institution, we had multiple regulators asking to do these adversary emulations, and just doing 10 of them per year is not really feasible. So we wrote a framework that takes from all the other ones and hopefully allows one exercise or one big adversary emulation per year to meet the regulatory requirements. That framework is free and it's open for you to download. Again, that's the Global Financial Markets. And then I'm an ISSA fellow, honored that I was given that last year. I love ISSA, that's Information Systems Security Association. I actually found both of my security jobs at Terramark before Citi and at Citi through networking there, so big shout out to them. And I'm also part of NSI, which is the National Security Institute, as a visiting technologist fellow. So that's a little bit about me. Now let's get to it. we're going to talk about purple team. You see the slides are purple. I'm wearing purple, although these lights I have in front of me right now make it look blue, but it is a purple. It's all purple. This entire 2 hours are going to be about purple teaming. And what is purple teaming, right? How hard can this be? My 6-year-old daughter can tell me how to make purple, and it's so easy, right? You just grab red and mix it with blue and you have purple. Like, well, why do we need to listen to George for 2 hours about this, right? And I generally try to start at my attempt with humor. So, just get red and blue and work together, there's Mike Tyson. He is back, by the way. He will be fighting. So interested in that, and obviously interested every time he talks. It's a funny person to hear. But it's not really like that, right? We think that it will all be great, right? Thank you to the stock image of people in meetings. Oh, y'all remember when we could all go to meetings and interact with each other? Yeah, I don't remember that either. And look at all those smiles, right? It's like everyone working together, and yeah, probably not how it goes, especially if the red team was mean before and they didn't really care about you or you as being the blue team, and all they wanted to do was win. This is what it might look like. So how can we fix that? Now, I came from an organization where we did just that. We evolved. We thought it was all about getting in, going full cyber, like Jake Williams likes to say. And soon enough, we learned that that was not the way to do it. You need to collaborate. When you collaborate, you have efficiencies. You can fix things and make security better for your organization. So instead of being adversarial, even though we are doing adversarial emulation, it's not about being adversarial with the blue teams and the red teams. And purple teaming is for everyone. It's not just about the red team teaching the blue team. The blue team also teaches the red team. It's really everyone working together to level up. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to first cover the purple team exercise framework. This entire webinar is going through this framework. So you should definitely download it. That way you have it. And you can see here we have a cycle that we cover and go through. Cyber threat intelligence first, which is important. That's what makes an adversary emulation. We talk about things like attack, which allows us to all speak the same language. Then we have preparation, and the preparation, whether you're doing a red team engagement that is zero knowledge or a purple team, you actually spend a lot of time doing preparation, right? A lot of the red teamers out there know this. It's not just, oh, we got in 5 minutes. It probably took way more prep than just that execution part. Then we execute the actual purple team engagement, and then we do lessons learned, like everything, right? Especially if you're in incident handling. What is that last step? Lessons learned. Always, you're going to learn something. You're going to have action items. So let's track those. So we're going to go through this framework. We're going to cover a lot of things. And again, it's recorded. So hopefully you can take this and propose a purple team exercise in your organization, get the buy-in, and show the value. So do download the framework so you can follow along. It's available at scythe.io/PTEF. You can download that and you'll be able to follow along. So high level. A purple team is a virtual team. There's actually only one organization I know that has a dedicated purple team. Had an excellent conversation with them, and really, all of this evolves. So it was interesting to see. But for most organizations, this will be a virtual team where the following teams work together. The cyber threat intelligence team. This is the team that does research and provides threats that have the capabilities, the opportunity, and the intent to get into your organization. So if you're in the financial sector, you're going to have different adversaries that you're going to want to emulate than if you're in healthcare, right? And we're going to cover all that. The red team is the offensive team. They're the ones in charge of doing the emulation, right? Of actually creating some payload, executing it just like an adversary would. And then you have the blue team, which are all the defenders, right? Security Operations Center, the hunt team, the DFIR folks, that's digital forensics and incident response, and you might have managed security services. Some of you might not have these teams in-house, and that's totally fine. We can accommodate for all of that so that you can still do some purple teaming. Someone here asked what the link was again to download. So I am typing it here for everyone to see. It's scythe.io/PTEF, the Purple Team Exercise Framework, PTEF. So again, at a high level, an exercise, a Purple Team exercise goes something like this. You all meet virtually nowadays, but could be in a room, and your cyber threat intelligence person or an exercise coordinator or the red team, really depending on who's live and who can do this, will present an adversary that's likely to attack your target organization. You go through the cyber threat intel, you understand how that adversary operates, and you cover the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures that that adversary has been observed doing to other organizations in your same sector or region. Then you deep dive into a particular set of TTPs and you go over technical details. So everyone's listening in on this, learning about this adversary. Some people are going to have more experience than others. Maybe the DFIR folks read some report somewhere. Maybe the red team has emulated this before. Maybe the blue team has been in the front lines, has seen some of these TTPs. That's all great. We're going to share that. And this step 2, it's a tabletop discussion. That means everyone there will share what they know about this particular TTP, thinking, hey, we probably have this control that would stop this one procedure. Or we have this forensic data that we might be able to acquire, and we would then be able to identify other systems that this TTP ran on. And you have that discussion, right? This is the collaboration part early on. Then in step 3, you have your red team that emulates that TTP, and they show it, right? They'll be prepared, and that's what we're going to cover today, is how to be prepared to then show how that procedure is actually done. And they share the screen. That way everyone sees and learns from the adversary view, if you will. And then our blue team, whoever's partaking here, could be the Security Operations Center, the Hunt Team, DFIR, all of them, go and they follow their processes. They follow their playbooks or their run books or however they call them in your organization to detect and respond to that TTP. So you give them some time to do this. Then they share their screen. And now it's the time for the red team to learn how the blue team works. And maybe the DFIR folks are going to learn from the SOC. And the SOC's going to learn from the Hunt team, etc. And they share on screen, this is step 5, how they identified this particular thing. Like, look, the proxy logs clearly show this. Or look, I got this alert on my SIM. Or I got this log on my endpoint. The forensics folks can say, well, look, if I pull memory, I can run this volatility script and tell that they ran Mimikatz or that there's this established connection out. And you share the screen. You take turns going through this. Then you document these results. What worked? Was everything here caught? Was something maybe logged, but it didn't alert? And maybe we should tune that. So if you can tune it live, perform that adjustment or tune that security control to increase your visibility. So if you know for sure that that particular TTP is bad, then turn that log into an alert. Or maybe start a response. In which case, the red team will then repeat that TTP and see if the new tuning has allowed for someone to initiate a process or to catch this particular bad actor at this particular step. Then you document any feedback, any additional action items, maybe something should have been working but didn't, maybe something worked great. One of the times we ran and got a C2 running, and within 30 seconds of us getting that shell, it showed up in the main dashboard of our Security Operations Center in 30 seconds. So it went from like a proxy log all the way through a log aggregator to a SIM to a dashboard in 30 seconds. That's awesome. So you document all this. You don't just document the bad. You document the good, the bad, everything that occurred. There's action items. You document those. you document lessons learned, and then you repeat step 1 and go through for the next TTP. And you do this over and over until you do all the TTPs that were proposed for that threat actor. So sounds very simple, right? But there's a ton of preparation to do this. So let's take a step back here first and talk about how we got here and where we have evolved and seen ethical hacking mature. Now, this particular maturity model we actually just released. You can see the link there at the bottom. This model is how I've seen it in the past 10 years. And again, my experiences are at a large financial, talking to other large financials through things like FS-ISAC, and also talking to my students for the past 10 years. That may come from smaller organizations, some are consultants. So while this is the maturity model I've seen the most, your organization might not follow it exactly, and that is perfectly fine. But at the highest of levels, ethical hacking has always been an assessment of a technology to understand if there are vulnerabilities. So we started many years ago doing vulnerability scanning. We would take an IP address or all the IPs in an organization, right? And hopefully they had an inventory. You get those list of IPs, you get those list of apps, and then you run an automated scan against it. An automated scan can be done through a multitude of tools. You have Nessus, Nexpose, Qualys, right? There's so many of these, and not saying anyone's better than the other. They're tools. You can evaluate your tools and decide which one's the best. So you run this vulnerability scan and you get this really long report, and you give it to the operations team and you say, fix this before next month because I'm going to run another scan, and 500 pages of vulnerabilities is really not good. We'll probably get hacked. That's kind of where it started. And then we started doing vulnerability assessment, which instead of just dropping those 500 pages on the operations team, we actually looked through them. And we would assess those vulnerabilities, see which ones actually mattered, right? If some vulnerability against an Apache server was caught against a Windows system, then that's probably a false positive. Let's remove that from the report. That way we do the assessment. Don't give that to the operations team. They're already busy. Let's just give them what really matters. Also, we use things like CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. And these signature-based controls don't have any idea of your threat model. They don't know if you're scanning from the internet, if you're scanning an air-gapped network, right? Different threat models, different attack surfaces. So you actually calculate CVSS. And I know a lot of people talk bad about CVSS, but the main and the base CVSS score is just that. It's a base score. There's a temporal and an environmental score that you need to calculate, and that will give you a much better idea of what to prioritize. So yes, base scores can be flawed. There could be a whole bunch of 10s or a whole bunch of 9.8s and 6.8s, and we know that. That's because there's an algorithm behind it, and that's what happened. But you can calculate these, and that is what the vulnerability assessment does. You have someone that understands this, understands your organization. They look at these scans, they validate vulnerabilities. They do vulnerability verification. And now your report is 30 pages, and those are given to the operations team to fix their technology. Then we started doing penetration testing, and working at a large financial, it was very hard to even get to this point where we can exploit vulnerabilities. That's really the difference between a vulnerability assessment where you verify and a pen test where you exploit. And pen testing took kind of two routes. One route was the identifying vulnerabilities that no one knew about, those O days, right? Excellent skill to have. It's a lot of fun to find your own O days, report them responsibly to the vendor, maybe get some bug bounty out of it, and that will then get patched. Everyone in the industry will get that patch, and you've made the world a safer place. So that's one method of pen testing. The other method was just exploiting these known vulnerabilities with your Metasploits and your core impacts and getting access to the target system, hopefully without crashing, especially in production, right? Because a lot of these vulnerabilities could be memory related. And if you corrupt the memory and you don't get the return pointer, then you can crash the service. If that service is running with privilege, then you crash the entire system and you get that blue screen of death that we've all seen. So that was pen testing, and really pen testing before we had wider scopes. We could get around a entire environment. But pen testing in the industry with regulations got really, really tied our hands. PCI DSS, for example, mentions that you have to do a yearly pen test on the PCI scope. And this scope is what really limited how far we could go, to the point where we were getting a list of, say, 10 IP addresses, pen test these. You would find a vulnerability, you would exploit that vulnerability, but once you got at that shell, you couldn't do much else. You couldn't move laterally, you couldn't dump credentials, you can do a lot of things that attackers would do. So that kind of led to red teaming. And red teaming is where you can emulate and try and test not only technology, but people, process, and technology. The way we started is we went after people, right? Because threat intelligence told us that people are falling for phishing campaigns. Most of these attacks are occurring through phishing. So we started testing people and sending them phishing emails. And if they clicked on it, then we would get access to their systems. So that's people. And then we actually noticed that we can test processes and technology as well. If we do a phishing campaign, someone reports that to the phishing mailbox, then how is that action? Do they go after that? Do they look at what other email addresses got that same malicious email and block those, right? That would be a process. We would also be testing the people to see if they were actually noticing this and reporting it, and if the blue team was actually actioning when someone reported a phishing campaign. And at the end of the day, you're still testing a bit of technology. But really here on the red team side, we moved from common vulnerability and exposures, which is CVE, right? cve.mitre.org, to tactics, techniques, and procedures, which are emulating what these malicious actors are doing. And this allowed us not only to gain access to a system, but also all the steps after that. Here's where we will reference the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Now, we did that for a bit of time and realized that we were still just giving the blue team reports of what went wrong. And that's when we decided we need to start working together as a purple team. Let's collaborate. Not only will I do this red team engagement and get access to a network and move laterally and phish people, etc., but I will show you how I did it so that we can work together. And then really the end point here, or where we will continue to evolve, and you see that there is an arrow after adversary emulation because we will continue to evolve. I don't know what the next step is, but we will, is doing adversary emulation. That was bringing in the cyber threat intelligence team so that what the red team was doing were TTPs for actors that matter. Now, I do want to mention something about assumed breach. Tim Medine from Red Siege has an awesome presentation on this. He did it at Hackfest. He actually did it yesterday again. And it's phenomenal because he's a consultant. And when they call a red team to come in, the consultants spend a lot of time gaining initial access, which is great. That means we've improved. But they're generally still getting that initial access. However, it takes like 70% of the time that was allocated for that assessment. And initial access is only one of the 11 MITRE tactics. So you're spending 70% of the time on that first tactic, and you don't have time to do the 200 plus other techniques. So you're not getting the most value out of that. If you are a mature organization, you are operating under the assumed breach model because you know that you're going to get breached, right? Or you already have seen a number of incidents because you have detections, and that is the assumed breach model, is we will start already inside and focus on what the attacker will do. The other reason for this is that there will always be vulnerabilities. Every second Tuesday of the month, Microsoft releases patches. There's new exploits all the time. There will always be new vulnerabilities. So really the initial access is an infinite space while once you get inside, you are more confined to a number of things you can do. It's still a lot of things you can do, but why don't we test those? And that is where we are today. So can't have a red team talk or mention red team without going into definitions. And shout out to everyone on Twitter that loves debating this. For red team, I will say a definition is a team that tests assumptions. This came from military terms, and they do quite a bit of exercises. You can look at some of the history behind red teams, and in the commercial space, we have taken that and really moved it forward. But I want to distinguish red teaming in the fact that it tests people, process, and technology, not just technology. It also tests for detection and response over just prevention, where in a pen test, you may be finding vulnerabilities and exploiting that vulnerability. That's a preventive control. In red teaming, you are moving past that, gaining access, and now testing the blue team. So your customer is really the blue team. You can see a quote here from the Red Team Journal. They had been around since '97, saying that red teaming is the practice of looking at a problem or situation from the perspective of an adversary. Now, the blue team. We love our blue team as well. I personally worked at a security operations center before. I did 10 years in offense, so don't think that I don't know that side. I actually worked at a company called Terramark, and we were the pilot for the Global Services Administration, GSA, hosting what is now called cloud computing. We had and worked with VMware in what we call the enterprise cloud, and we were hosting this website called whitehouse.gov. In 2008, new president had just come in, President Obama, and they decided to go with a Drupal site. And Drupal is based on PHP, which we all know is inherently just vulnerable. And that is kind of what we did and had to defend against. We also had to defend against the Department of Transportation.org, .gov, the Veterans Affairs, some private companies and commercial companies. So it was, I've been on that side. I've picked up that red phone when it was the office of the president calling, and I froze because I knew it was the president of the United States, because it was a massive DDoS attack back in July 4th, 2008, I want to say, or 2009. And it's tough, right? It's a lot of work. So what is the blue team? The blue team are the defenders in an organization. This could be the Security Operations Center. If you don't have a Security Operations Center, then it can be a managed security service provider. If you do have an internal team, it might be the hunt team, your incident response team, your digital forensics team. And I'll argue that everyone is part of the blue team. Like even the red team is part of the blue team, because when the real adversaries come after you, you all work together. I'll even argue that Bob from accounting is also part of the blue team, because when Bob receives a phishing email, he should report it to the phishing team or some blue team that will be able to action it. So blue team is really everyone in defense, and they have a tough job. Their job is 24/7. It's very manual. There are some automation platforms, right? SOAR being the latest one, right? And they defend the entire organization. And then adversary emulation. I was actually talking about this today on LinkedIn, so shout out if you're on the call, about are red teams only adversary emulations? And I will say that they're not. I will say that adversary emulation is a type of red team engagement. You can have other types of red team engagements and exercises. And you can do these from a zero knowledge perspective, where the blue team doesn't know about it, or you can do this from a purple team perspective, which is what we're going to talk about today, that the blue team does know. And the difference here is that adversary emulations are intelligence-led. We use cyber threat intelligence. It's extremely important and really shows that your organization is evolving and maturing to have your blue team work with your red team, working with your cyber threat intelligence team. So cyber threat intel could be an internal team or an external team. That could be a vendor. And We'll go through this a little more, and shout out to Katie Nichols and Cody Thomas, both when they worked at MITRE. They presented at a SANS Summit on how using MITRE ATT&CK for threat-based adversary emulation. So we're going to dive into this a little more, but really the point of cyber threat intelligence is to understand the target organization and identify adversaries that are likely to attack it, that have the capability, the intent, and the opportunity to attack your organization, gather threat intel about it, both from the IOC perspective all the way to TTP. So we will cover those here. Now, internal versus external teams. I mentioned cyber threat intel could be an internal team, could be an external team. We often see this with red teams. Not all organizations have an internal red team, and that's fine, but there's pros and cons to each. From an internal perspective, the red team will do repeated engagements. They might find the same thing over and over, and they might have to do a lot of retesting, right? So shout out to any of my ex-colleagues that are on this call that know what happened. When we did our first red team, we actually had a pause for about 6 months, and all we did was retesting. Back in the day, Empire had just come out, PowerShell Empire, right? So PowerShell was becoming more used. We had a bunch of systems that all had PowerShell on them, and nothing was being logged. And just to get logging working, first you had to upgrade your PowerShell to at least version 3 or 5 so you can turn on logging. Then you had to log that locally. Then you had to move those logs to a log aggregator and then get that to a SIEM. Sounds super easy, right? Not when you have 400,000 systems. So we spent a lot of time just redoing the same test over and over again. First, to get logs turned on in a non-production environment, make sure that PowerShell was the right version, make sure we were logging the right event IDs, then getting that deployed into production, then getting the logs moved from endpoints to a target, to a log aggregator, and then having some security analytics, right? A ton of work. But we were just doing the same thing over and over, which is important as well. It has its value. Now, an internal red team also has privileged and insider knowledge. They are constantly testing the environment, the people, the process, and the technology. So if they were to do an outside-in engagement, they would know exactly what they need to do. You can say, well, that's good. They're going to get into that assume breach position much faster, but it also doesn't let you measure how long that assume breach, how long that initial access would take. So I like to see the internal teams are more of sparring partners, right? And I know a lot of you in InfoSec are into BJJ or boxing and UFC. So quick analogy here. When you train, right, we got Mike Tyson working out and he's going to fight. So he has his sparring partner. Does he knock out his sparring partner? No, he never knocks him out. They hit each other, but they work both on the offensive and on the defensive. And then as one gets better, the other one gets better. And they do that so that when it is time for Mike Tyson to go fight, they're all in the same corner, they're all working together, and they're using all that knowledge for the common cause. Now, external teams, again, these could be external red teams, external cyber threat intel teams, even MSSP, they're offering new perspectives, especially if you bring them on as consultants. Things like Grim that do some awesome red team consulting, you bring them in from the outside, they have no insider knowledge. So they're going to learn about you from what's out there. They're really emulating an adversary from that perspective. They will do a snapshot type of engagement during the window that they're offered. And if you do go and talk to Graham, for instance, you will see that a red team engagement isn't just a 1 or 2 week engagement. These are much longer engagements. And shout out to you, Dave Mayer, if you're on. Awesome stuff that you're doing over there at Graham. So let's move towards a purple team, towards that sparring partner, right? And that's what we are here today to build this process, right? So a virtual team, functional team working together to improve the defensive security posture. I mentioned already at high level, our cyber threat intelligence is going to provide a threat actor. Then they're going to create and grab TTPs of that threat actor. The red team will create an adversary emulation plan. We will tabletop it to discuss what is possible and what is not possible. Again, what we assume is possible is not possible. Then you'll actually emulate that. The blue team will look for indicators of compromise, and you work together on remediation and action. Then you repeat this over and over. You might be able to do some zero knowledge exercises as well based on TTPs that you know are detected and alerted but not prevented. So lots of goals and lots of reasons why you would do a purple team exercise. I put this here. If you've never done a purple team exercise, all of these are opportunities for you to do an exercise. You can say, let's try this attack chain against the target organization, or let's train the defenders. We have new folks that join the Security Operations Center, or we're migrating MSSPs. So let's train them in our environment. Or you can test new TTPs that haven't been tested before, right? We have Black Hat and DEF CON coming up next week. There might be new things that we need to work on and test for our organization, see if it works or doesn't. You can also test for processes. I mentioned the simple one of sending a phishing email, see if the person reports it to a phishing campaign, phishing email, and then what action happens. We actually did one like this where we submitted this phishing campaign on our own. We actually created a domain that was doing trademark infringement on our organization. It was stealing credentials. We sent that in time, from the time that we reported it to the time it was entirely taken down by the team. And that time we worked on and agreed that should be a little less. Then 6 months later, we tried it again. You can also do this in preparation for a zero knowledge red team engagement, or if you're a red team and you did a zero knowledge engagement, then you can do a purple team exercise to reveal what you did, to replay what you did, or to train and get better. And then lastly, foster a collaborative culture within your security organization, which is important. I'm just looking to see if there's any questions here because I am doing this live. And I think Christine's answering a lot of them, so thank you. So methodology. So we're here going to cover the purple team exercise framework. We're going to start with cyber threat intelligence, then cover preparation, then execute and do something. I have a number of different test cases here that I'm going to show you, and then lessons learned. So if you don't want to use PTEF, you want to use something else, there's the cyber kill chain. This really allowed a lot of senior managers to understand how adversaries worked. It has its flaws, right? It's 7 steps, and between command and control and action on objectives, there are none. So you do a lot between getting C2 and actually meeting your objectives. So Paul Poles tried to fix that with a paper he wrote on unified cyber kill chain. If you're in financial space, there's a ton of regulations. Bank of England has CBEST. European Central Bank has TIBER. Monetary Authority of Singapore has this red team adversary attack simulation exercises. Hong Kong Monetary Authority has ICAS, which stands for Intelligence-Led Cyber Attack Simulation Testing. And as I mentioned, I was a co-author of the framework for the regulatory use of pen testing in the financial services industry. So all those are frameworks as to what we should do. But really, the main one we use is MITRE ATT&CK. This is the actual testing framework, and it stands for Adversary Tactics, Techniques, and Common Knowledge. And here we have it, because we have to have a slide on it, right? So on the top, we have our tactics. That's initial access, execution, etc. Those are the attacker goals. That is what the attacker wants to do. They want to gain initial access. This is where I mentioned assume breach. There's only one related to initial access. Everything else happens once you're inside. Then you have your techniques, which are all the other ones, right? And now we have sub-techniques as well. So you can click on one of these and see its sub-techniques and go deeper and see the procedures. That's the tactics, techniques, and procedures. So there's a number of these. There's about 260 of them, and that is what we want to focus on. So as we plan for this, there are going to be roles and responsibilities. If you're doing a proposal, you should definitely assign roles so everyone knows what they are responsible for. So head of security, this could be a CISO, this could be the head of SOC, really depending on your organization, but they're a sponsor. They're going to approve this exercise and a budget. Then you have cyber threat intelligence. They're going to provide the cyber threat intel. You have the red team and blue team managers, which are going to assign people to leave their BAU, their business as usual processes and everything they have to do as far as operations, to go and attend this exercise so that they learn. So you need them as stakeholders as well, or sponsors. Then you have the red team, which will be the team emulating the adversary. You have your blue team, which are all the various different teams that do defense, that do security operations center, etc. And then you have a project manager. And I highly, highly encourage you to have someone that is a project manager as the exercise coordinator role. This is very important because we're going to bring a lot of teams together. And if you assign this to any one of the teams that should be collaborating with the other, maybe that relationship is not there. However, if you bring in a project manager, they establish new relationships with everyone and they get things done. So highly encourage an exercise coordinator. They are going to be the main point of contact. They're going to ensure that the cyber threat intel, whether it's an external vendor or an internal folks, provide that cyber threat intel. They're going to get the sponsors, make sure that everything's approved. They're going to put this beautiful proposal together. They'll probably take good notes. They'll have an action item. They'll get feedback from attendees. They can send daily emails once the exercise is going, and of course, compile and deliver the lessons learned. Highly, highly, highly encourage you to have an exercise coordinator. So sponsors. The sponsors are the ones that are going to approve this exercise. So you need to get their buy-in. It's good that your senior management is technical. I had the benefit of having a very technical CISO that understood all of this. So our approval was very easy. I know that is not the case for many organizations. They'll look at a budget and see that you need to take 5 people out of their day-to-day job for a week or a couple days, or they'll see that you need to buy an enterprise tool or use a consulting company to help you do this, and they have to approve that. You'll have your goals and your scope all documented, and then you need members of various teams out of their daily routine to come and participate in this. If any of these are external teams, then it's also going to cost money. So sponsors are important. Ensure they get their buy-in. Generally, the first one will be the lowest budget exercise you do, but you're going to show so much value in it that you're going to be able to do others after that first initial one. Someone asked here, what do you think about Vector? Is it useful? And yes, the answer is yes, 100% Vector is super useful. I'm going to show you Vector here after we do our execution. So time requirements, some of these run for 1 to 5 days. Our first one, I think, was a 4-day exercise, mostly hands-on keyboard, right? This is going to be very technical. You're going to actually be emulating something in an environment while the blue team is identifying it. So you need a lot of preparation. I put 2 to 8 weeks here, 8 weeks being the most I've seen an exercise prep for. The actual exercise lasts a couple days, maybe a week, if you do maybe a day per week, and eventually you're going to want to operationalize this. But in this case, we're talking only about the exercise. And lessons learned, generally you have that document ready and out within 2 weeks. Don't exceed those 2 weeks. So we start with cyber threat intel. We have the cyber threat intel. If they're coming from the outside, if you're hiring someone from the outside, they first need to understand the target organization. Then with an understanding of that target organization, you can identify the adversary that has the opportunity, the capability, and the intent to hack your organization. So if you are in the financial industry space, you have a whole list of people that try to attack you, right? The whole fin groups. If you are in healthcare, you have some others like Orange Worm and Deep Panda. If you're doing COVID research now, you have Cozy Bear to deal with, right? All based on cyber threat intel that I've read recently. Then you need to gather all this threat intel. And that's where the cyber threat intel analyst really thrives on. They're really good at grabbing all this threat intel. Then you need to extract TTPs, because for an adversary emulation, you are focused on tactics, techniques, and procedures, the attacker behavior. You will grab those TTPs, extract it from the cyber threat intel, analyze it and organize it into a threat profile, and then you create an adversary emulation plan. Now, of course, you emulate the adversary. So again, shout out to Katie Nichols and Cody Thomas. Also, shout out to Eric from Envisio. He wrote the security 599 and 699. He actually gave me most of these icons and allowed me to use them. So I'll to you. Types of cyber threat intel. So David Bianco has the infamous pyramid of pain, which is all the different types of cyber threat intel you might get about a particular actor. You might get IOCs, indicators of compromise, that are hash values or IP addresses, domain names. All of those you're not going to emulate, right? You're not going to do or use exactly those same domains, those same IP addresses. You're really focused on the top here, on the TTPs and the tools, because that is where you and the red team will be focused on. The tools, we'll cover a number of them. We have the C2 matrix that has 51 tools right now that allow you to establish command and control and do and emulate a number of these techniques. And again, we want to focus on the behavior. Now, the pyramid of pain really says that from starting at the bottom, it's easy or trivial to find some of these in your environment, but getting to the top, it's more difficult or tough to identify adversary behavior. This applies the same for red teams or adversaries. It is tough for a red team or an adversary to change their TTPs and change their behavior, while it's very easy for them to change a hash value or an IP address. We'll show you how to do that. So extracting TTPs, for anyone on here that is CTI, then you know what I'm talking about, right? You see these cyber threat intel reports. They have a lot of information. This I took from my SEC 564 class. There's a particular threat actor that we look there, and we actually go through an exercise of pulling out TTPs. And you see there's a paragraph with a lot of information. But there's various different types of threat intel here. There is AutoIT, which is a software. There is PowerShell, which is a technique, now a sub-technique actually. There's an IP address, which we wouldn't care too much about, but we can see that it uses HTTPS on port 8080. That might be important for us. We see other tools like PowerSploit. We see signatures and hash values, which we're not going to emulate, right? We don't need those hash values. They're not very important for us. We want to focus on the TTPs. Another thing you can do if you don't have your own CTI team is use Attack Navigator. Attack Navigator is a free tool. It's actually hosted on the internet, or you can host it internally. That shows you the MITRE ATT&CK framework. In this case, we see sub-techniques here, and it allows you to select a particular threat actor. So let me go and demo. This will be our first demo here of using Attack Navigator. So this is Attack Navigator here. And in this case, we are going to pick a threat actor. We're going to do APT33. I chose APT33 because I saw the audience list. There's people from all over the industry, from all over the world. So I chose APT33 because they're an Iranian threat actor. They're also used and talked about quite a bit earlier this year with the assassination of Soleimani, an Iranian military personnel that was assassinated by the US. So we use this selection controls tool up here on the top right. We go to multi-select, and we can just pick APT33 and select it. You see how some of these are now highlighted. We can go over here to technique color and just change that to red so that we can see a little better, right? And there are sub-techniques, so pay attention. If there's any number here, that means that they're sub-techniques and we have to expand them. So you see here, we start expanding and expanding. So this is just initial access and execution. We can go through and really get known TTPs that this particular threat actor has used. So this is for APT 33, which we will show you and actually do. Then you need to analyze and organize that. Even if you use Attack Navigator, you want to create a little table because senior management understands tables. In the table, you can have a description, what is this adversary? Why does it matter? Well, this is an Iranian threat actor. And it matters because we're an American company, and Iran mentioned that they are going to attack us. They will retaliate. We just don't know how. And cyber is probably one of the methods that they would. What's the objective of this threat actor? Well, to gain access and do something. And then you break it down by tactic on the left and various technique IDs on the right. This gives you a very easy on the eyes, right? You're not showing your senior management this entire attack navigator screen because it's difficult for them to understand. You show them this. Now, one of the things that we're doing is called Threat Thursdays. It's a weekly adversary that we choose. We introduce the adversary. We consume the cyber threat intelligence. We map it to MITRE ATT&CK. Then we present an adversary emulation plan. We share that plan with you, and then we actually emulate it. And then, of course, at the end, we talk about how to defend against that adversary. So if we pull up here, Threat Thursday, we have APT 33. So let's dive in a little bit more. We have some cyber threat intelligence about this particular actor. We can see where to pull other cyber threat intel from Symantec, from Trend Micro, etc. If you want to read more, then we offer the Attack Navigator. This is a JSON file that you can pull, and we create the threat profile for you. So you have the description and the tactic here with all the different TTPs. Then we cover how to actually emulate it. So in this case, we talked about doing PowerShell for discovery. So even if you don't use Scythe, you can run PowerShell and just run PowerShell with this part, not with the Scythe commands in front of it, and you'll be able to do lots of these. You can actually see that right here. We cover how to do a lot of this. In this case, we covered lateral movement as well, moving from one target to another. They did persistence through a service, so we covered how to create a service. And then there's a video of me explaining how to do it. We also cover how to defend against this particular threat actor. So all of this goes back to knowing and learning what the malicious actor is doing. So here's our threat profile. This is APT 33. This is an adversary that's likely to target us and what we're going to be doing here today. So, of course, read through this, but you can see how they get in, how they do command and control. We can see they use port 80 and 443, HTTPS and HTTP and HTTPS, and then they do a lot of different things once they get initial access. So it all comes down to TTPs. You've got this threat actor from your CTI team. They said this actor is likely to attack us. Now you have to plan and choose which TTPs you're going to do in the exercise. You want to choose TTPs that are not being prevented, because if the red team tries something that's prevented, sure, you're going to show that that doesn't work. Maybe pick one or two just to make the blue team feel good that there is some sort of prevention going on. But really, you want to focus on things that are logged. TTPs are detected and TTPs that are alerted, because we're here focusing on improving people and process as well, not just the technology. So choosing this and doing a quick tabletop with the managers is a great idea. So you have this threat profile for APT 33, and now you're going to sit with the red team manager, the blue team managers, your SOC, your hunt team, your DFIR folks, and you're going to say, okay, the first TTP, do we have any visibility? And let's say HTTP over port 80. Do we have visibility of that? Of course, we have outbound proxies. We will know any HTTP connection that goes out over port 80. Okay, what about HTTPS? Well, it's going to depend. If you go out through an IP address, it's going to give you an invalid cert. So we're going to block that. Okay, good. Let's test that to make sure that's valid. What about HTTPS over a domain? Well, depending on the domain, it might, if it's depending on what it's categorized, we may or may not have visibility. We might have encrypted visibility, or we might actually have TLS decryption. Okay, and what about something like running Mimikatz? Oh, we should definitely be able to catch that. So you go through here as a tabletop with the managers to select which various techniques and procedures you're going to try in this exercise. One of the things the red team will then have to do, and this is all part of the planning and preparation phase, is determine what tool to use. So based on that threat actor, based on APT 33, they will then need to figure out which tool to use. So there's the C2 matrix, a command and control matrix that shows you a lot of these capabilities. So if you know that you're going to target a Windows system, you can go over here on the top right where you see agents and filter out by Windows. And then you know you want to do HTTP, you can filter out by HTTP. And you can figure out if you need to do domain fronting and filter out by that. So there's actually a questionnaire on the C2 matrix that allows you to choose through that. There's also a slingshot. So if you've never installed one of these, say you don't have a red team, which is perfectly fine, you can still do some of this. You can download the SANS Slingshot C2 Matrix Edition virtual machine, which comes with 8 C2s already pre-installed. And we have a how-to site that explains how to use these particular C2s. So we go to c2matrix.com, you can go ask, and here you can say, I need multiple users, I need HTTP, I'm going after Windows, I need to be proxy aware because we use proxies, I want custom profiles, I want to be able to have some jitter, and domain fronting is important. So there you have a list of what you can use. Or you can jump off and say, I need logging, which you might need. What kind of interface do you want? Well, a web and a GUI will do, or I just really want a command line, which you actually don't have any. But here you can choose exactly which one to use. You also have the documentation. This is a Git book. Here is the SANS Slingshot C2 Matrix Edition. It comes with all of these pre-installed. There's how to download it for free. All you need is a SANS account, walkthrough video of me showing you how to use it. And then you can go and say, I want to use Empire. You click on Empire and you can see more videos and actual walkthroughs of how to install Empire, how to run it, how to emulate various different TTPs. For this one, you can actually see APT 19. I took this from another Threat Thursday. You can set everything up and you'll be ready to go and continue on to the next phase. You then want to have a plan. You can create these plans. I like APT3's emulation plan. It's just so pretty. And a lot of people understand like, oh, phase 1, you have to set up your C2. Then you have to create the payloads. Then you're going to compromise the host and you're going to do these things. So great to use. And we'll actually show you some of our playbooks. So logistics, you need to pick a location. And this is if you're doing an in-person exercise. The first time I gave this talk was at the SANS Purple Team Summit. And the way that we figured out how to get the red and blue teams to collaborate and be friendly to each other involved sending everyone to the same location, inviting them out for drinks, for food, letting them play CTFs together, right? Doing all these things to create that collaborative culture. Now, we have COVID. So you can't really travel, or you shouldn't be traveling. If you do, wear a mask. And you might not be able to do this in person. So how can you do this remotely? Well, you choose a platform. Choose something that everyone can install on their systems. Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, whatever you use. See if everyone can use their systems to log into that, because sharing the screen is going to be very, very important. So just make sure that you can do that. If you're doing physical, do consider some things like travel approval. Yeah, us technical people that never travel don't think about this. Yeah, you actually need travel approval, and which means you probably need a corporate credit card so that you can expense things. And there's logistics and policies around that. Also plan to arrive a day early. Don't be that person that missed it because a flight was delayed, because some tropical storm is going to hit you in South Florida this weekend and you didn't plan for that, right? Plan ahead. Get a training room. So one thing that I will know is that a conference room that fits 8 people doesn't actually mean it fits 8 people with their laptops and is ideal for what you're doing, right? So look at the rooms. Maybe a training room might be better. Remember, everyone's going to have a system. Some people are going to have two systems, two laptops, and make sure that everyone can actually share what's going on. So logistics is important. This is the non-technical part of this webcast. And then target systems. Now, I will argue that the best place to test and do a purple team exercise is in production. Now, some of you are going to argue with me, and that's fine. I'm going to give you a solution if you want to do this in non-production. But if you're really testing people, process, and technology, then in production is where that test has to occur. If you're just going to train people, you can do that in a lab for sure. But if you want to test everything, how it happens, I'm going to tell you, it has to be in production. So what do? Because you don't want to actually compromise a system that's being used by someone else, is you go and you provision production systems for this exercise. So the system will be in production, yet the only use of this system will be for your purple team exercise. Aha. So what do you need? You need exact images of the various systems you have in your organization, right? Endpoint operating systems, that's probably where you want to start, right? We know a lot of these attacks start through phishing. And where do people read phishing emails? On their endpoint. So grab those standard endpoints, right? Grab 2 of each, because if you do hose one, which happened on our first exercise, you don't want to be scrambling to get another system, right? So get at least a couple systems. Hopefully most of you are on Windows 10. I think everyone skipped Windows 8, just like we skipped Vista. But if not, get those. And then if you have Windows 7, you get a Windows 7 machine, because if you still have that, you should probably be detecting more than on a Windows 10 machine. If you run Linux, grab some Linux endpoints or some Mac systems. Obviously, all this requires budget and money, especially those Macs, right? Because you can't just virtualize them. You might want physical systems, also virtual systems, right? VDI is common. Terminal services or Citrix, any of that. And then server operating systems, right? Whatever you have in your organization, get a couple of these as well. This is all part of the budget, and that's why we're still talking about preparation. Next, security tools. Make sure that these new systems that were just provisioned have all the security tools, right? This sounds obvious, but I can't even count how many times a new system was provisioned and it didn't have the latest patches like other systems had. It actually needed 8 reboots before it was similar to the other systems. Or it didn't have the forensics tools deployed, because forensics tools are deployed 5 weeks after, right? Or the image acquisition tools aren't there. So just make sure all that's there, and make sure it's reporting to the right place, right? So anti-malware, anti-exploit, antivirus, all that should be going to some production dashboard. EDR, if you're using endpoint detection and response, make sure that's there, that's running, that's reporting. Also look at your network traffic. Is this system going out through the proxy? Are those proxy logs going through correctly? Are you seeing all the network traffic, right? All of these things, you might actually even find problems right before, or process issues before you even get to your exercise. Then create some target accounts. Again, you're going to be compromising systems and executing things there. You don't want to do that on a real account. So whatever your organization calls it, service account, functional ID, secondary user account, get those. Get those, and those are the ones that are going to be logging onto this target system. Make sure that those accounts have access to the internet. Some of you are able to block access through GPO, and maybe a secondary account shouldn't have access to internet. Enable that. Get access to email. If you're going to send a phishing email, you need email. Some processes and organizations are different. Just to make sure you're not compromising real credentials and real systems, yet you're still doing this in production, which is the important part. So request these accounts, request these emails, etc. This is why I gave 8 weeks for preparation. Now, testing in a lab. Yes, you can definitely do this in a lab. Want to give a shout out to my friends over at Black Hills Information Security. They've created a new company called Defensive Origins, and they have something called Atomic Purple Team, as well as a number of different repos for creating labs for doing this. So they will be presenting at DEF CON as well. Shout out to them. Here are all the links. I linked it on Twitter as well. So if you want to do this in non-production, by all means, go for it. It's better to do it in non-production than not to do it at all. But again, if you want to test full people, process, and technology, you're going to want to do it in prod. So then we're up to attack infrastructure. So attack infrastructure, very similar. If you're a red teamer, you probably go through all of this in all of your engagements. If you're not a red teamer and you're setting this up for the first time, well, welcome. This is a lot of prep that happens on the red team side before we do engagements. First, you need to choose and procure an external hosting provider. If you're testing things like command and control out to the internet, if you are testing a number of these different TTPs, you're going to want systems on the internet. You can also have internal systems, and I'll cover that in a couple slides. Then once you choose, in this case, I'm going to be using DigitalOcean for a relay. I'm going to be using Google Cloud for my C2 server. Then create the virtual machines, do operational security, only allow access to these machines from your systems, only allow C2 connections from your target environment. Set up any payload delivery sites if you need to do that, if your C2 framework doesn't allow that. Set up the C2 infrastructure that involves installing the C2 server and setting up those redirectors and relays. So in this case, I'm using Google Cloud for my C2 server, and I got a DigitalOcean droplet that does a relay based on the different test cases we're going to do here. Then if you're going to send email, make sure you create an SMTP server. You can use things like SendGrid or shared email services like Office 365 or Gmail, etc. Or you can set up your own SMTP server. If you haven't done that in a long time, things have changed. And you will need to give that time to build reputation and make sure you can send emails inside. Then you need to purchase domains, right? This is another part of where this will cost money. Generally, a domain is a little less than $20. Then if you're going to have TLS certificates, you need to generate them with things like Let's Encrypt or purchase them. If you're going to do domain fronting, then you need to set that up in a content delivery network. You will or might need to categorize your domain and make sure that the proxies and outbound controls in the environment will let you out. Provide those IPs and domains to the blue team and test before the exercise. You want to test all these communications before the exercise. That way, when you get to the exercise, you're not focusing on troubleshooting tools. This is one of the reasons why you want to use an enterprise tool to do this emulation. You don't want to be there troubleshooting and wasting people's time while the red team figures out why something's not working. You can also do this internally, create internal virtual machines, set up your C2 servers, ensure those systems are allowed. If you have network access control solutions like Forescout, right? Make sure that you can access that system. And then test those payloads as you did. Then lastly, red team prep. You're gonna set up at least 2 systems to show the attack activity. That's what I have here. I have this laptop and my backup laptop in the event that this just decides to crash. Ensure the attack infrastructure is fully functional. I did that right before this call. Ensure target systems are accessible. I made sure of that as well. Document all the commands required to emulate these TTPs. Now, depending on what framework you're using, you need to create resource scripts or notepads for copy and pasting so that you're not fat fingering anything during the exercise. And of course, test all this out. So in this case, this is our playbook for what we're going to do here. I mentioned APT 33, so we're going to do APT 33, and then we're also going to do a number of different test cases. The first one is HTTP to an IP address with a 5-second heartbeat from a file called bacon.exe. And this is because Egypt from Black Hills wrote on Twitter this week, pen test pro tip, beacon.exe is common, boring, sounds like commercial off-the-shelf malware. Bacon.exe is awesome, sounds like something delicious. So Thank you, Egypt. Shout out to you. Our first payload is going to be bacon.exe. It is going to be executed with technique 1204, subtechnique 002, which is user execution of a malicious file. The user will simply double click bacon.exe and it will establish an HTTP connection to my DigitalOcean droplet, which will then relay to my Scythe server. Test case 2 is HTTPS. This time we're going to execute it with a DLL. That's a signed binary proxy execution with the run DLL32 technique. And here's how I execute that: run DLL32.exe, bacon.dll, platform client main. And then the third one will be HTTPS to a domain instead of an IP, also a 5-second heartbeat. And the reason I chose 5 seconds is because we are doing this live, and I know no one's going to have the patience to wait more than 5 seconds for a remote connection to come in. And we're going to execute this with command and script interpreter, in this case, PowerShell. Now, if you do take and copy and paste what you see here, it's not going to work. While it is currently live, there's an ACL in place that will not allow your IP to access this particular site and download this payload because it is a live payload. So let's again switch over and take a look at the prep. So in this case, we are going to use Scythe. Scythe is a Purple Team platform. It allows us to do this over and over and over again. So I'm logged into Scythe here. I go to campaign list and I see the 5 campaigns that I've created for this exercise. I mentioned HTTP. We click on that campaign and we see that I've tested this before with some other systems. We can look at the campaign details just to make sure we have everything in place. We have a IP address that's going to go over port 80 over HTTP, right? So this is the part where the red team is showing the blue team and everyone what it's going to happen. The heartbeat is set to 5 seconds. The payload just has a controller and a loader. It has a PDB. This is the PDB, and this is the timestamp. We then go back to campaign list. Let's look at HTTPS to an IP address. So we look here, we show campaign details, and again, a Windows payload called HTTPS. It's using HTTPS. It's going to an IP address. Again, 5-second beacon, has a controller and a loader, and it has a different PDB and timestamp. I would expect the DFIR team to be able to pull this information out and tell it to all of us. Then HTTPS to a domain. Again, very simple campaign where we use HTTPS and we're going to madrid.scythedemo.com. And again, just doing a controller and loader with a different PDB. That means that once we run the first one, if any forensics are done, it shouldn't be able to stop any of our other campaigns. Now, I did mention APT33. APT33 does a whole lot more things. This will be the last one we run because it does do a lot. It does Windows, HTTPS to an IP address, and then once it connects, it's going to run through a number of TTPs. These TTPs are all part of our adversary emulation plan. It's going to take a print screen. It's going to run Who Am I? It's going to steal from the clipboard. It's going to start a keylogger. It's going to get sysinfo. It's going to get process information. It's going to load services. It's going to load ARP. It's going to pull what's in the documents folder. It's going to run some unmanaged PowerShell, and it's going to look for any shared connections. So all of this are our plans. We did this ahead of time. We've created these payloads. We've tested them. When I go show you them, I'm just going to double click and they're going to work. So SOC and Hunt team preparation, what do they have to do? Well, the SOC and the Hunt team will validate that the security tools are indeed reporting to their production tools. Remember, these are new systems. We got to make sure that they are reporting and logs are getting aggregated and whatnot. We're going to make sure that the attack infrastructure is accessible, that the attack infrastructure is being decrypted to test that TLS decryption and interception. We're going to verify the allow list and make sure that the red team can access their payloads. And we might also look and take a look at our threat hunting playbooks, which I'll give a shout out here to Cyber War Dog. excellent person, works at Microsoft right now, and there's this great resource for threat hunting playbooks. For DFIR should do some things as well. For example, can the DFIR team just pull memory and forensic information from any computer they want? I would imagine the answer is no, because they really shouldn't, right? They would have to create some sort of test case or a case or incident. Create that. Mark it as an exercise. Mention what artifacts you're going to be grabbing. Now, some forensics tools take a long time. If we look at some of the systems we're running, we might have 64 gigs of memory on them. It takes a while to do that. So you might want to do some live forensics, right? Just to move this purple team exercise quicker. If it's an in-person exercise, or leave this as action items. Maybe do some live forensics and then leave the actual forensics for later. So all of that was preparation. I mentioned there's a lot of preparation. It's taken almost 60% of the time of this webinar just talking about preparation. So we're finally there. It's the day of the exercise. If you're an attendee, that's awesome. You haven't had to do anything up until this point. You now join this meeting and you know you're going to learn and do some awesome stuff. So we kick it off. Generally, a sponsor should kick it off. If you could get your CISO on there or the head of security, have them go and motivate the attendees. Say, listen, all of you are here because you are awesome. You all serve various different purposes, and we want to train you. We want you to work with different teams. You do some excellent red teaming, but you don't know about blue teaming, so let's change that. Or you do some great SOC work, let's show you how the attacker rules work. We're all here to work together and explain the flow of the exercise. So what's the flow? Here's where we dive a little deeper into how things happen. So first of all, Cyber Threat Intel or Exercise Coordinator Red Team will present the adversary. What adversary are we doing? APT33. Let's go over APT33, right? And I've already done this in this webinar, but if we want to do it again, we can pull up APT33 over here, say APT3 is an Iranian threat group that's been carrying out operations since 2013. Their main objective is to establish persistence to partner and suppliers of targets and then mount supply chain attacks. We can take a look at their techniques and what they're doing. Did I close my navigator window? No, I did not. This is what they do. These are the TTPs. This is how it works. They send a phishing email with an attachment or a link. They also use valid accounts. A user would then execute a malicious file or a malicious link. It then runs PowerShell and Visual Basic. They also create scheduled tasks. They do persistence with registry keys, etc. So you go through all of these, explain all these things. And then you discuss it, you tabletop it. So SOC, how do you think we would detect this? Well, if it's coming in through email, we use Proofpoint, and shout out to Proofpoint and their work on Emotet. That was our Threat Thursday this week. And I got to meet with Sharad from Proofpoint talking about what Emotet has been doing. So shout out to them. So Proofpoint will detect this email coming in, especially if they do it as an attachment, we'll definitely catch that. Then if a user executes an executable, we should have some sysmon log. Great, let's document that. Let's make sure that that happens. Great, now the hunt team. What do you think you can find? Well, if they did these particular TTPs, we'll be able to look in Splunk and find some of the things that are happening there. And then DFIR can say, okay, if we get memory, we will be able to see that there's some established connections. Now it's time for a red team to execute the TTP. They're going to provide the attacker IP, they're going to provide the targets, and provide the exact time that all of this is happening. So let's do this live. For the attacking part, I'm going to go here, and we're going to say the first thing we're going to try is HTTP campaign. And the most executable. established to this IP address right here, 161.35.105.153. And this is the information about it. Our targets are these servers. So you see the server up here. I've already put all the various different payloads on here. And the first payload we're going to run is bacon.exe. So we can take a look at Bacon, see it's a very small payload, and we're just going to double click it, and it's going to run. And we see it there thinking and hopefully running. As it runs, we know the IP of this system is 35243.216.81. We can load up Wireshark, take a look at any communication going outbound. We should see some HTTP occurring at some point there. I think we saw a little beacon. Now, we can do other things, like if we know that this is connecting back to this IP, we can filter this out to 161.35.105.153. And there we see the communication going out. We see it's establishing a TCP connection. Then it's sending a GET request. We can see the GET request here. Okay, good. We are seeing some traffic. Now, where else can we see this traffic occurring? We can also see how often this beacon goes out. We see the time over here, 41 seconds, then 46 seconds, then 52 seconds. We can see the beacon, right? A 5-second beacon is coming out now 57 seconds, all to this IP address. So on the local system, we're able to identify that this beacon is actually running. There is a C2 connection ran. However, antivirus did not catch this. Windows Defender, what's going on? Why didn't Windows Defender catch it? Then, of course, we can show this on our side. So from the attacker perspective, the red team side, you just click on HTTP here, and you see the active connection. It's running on process ID 4632. Can the blue team identify that that is the process that's running? Yes. Actually, the blue team wants to do something else. The blue team wants to see if it's appearing in Splunk. So this is another system. This is 35243.175.2. This is our Splunk instance. We're going to do a search here for that desktop because it was provided. We want Windows event logs, and in this case, let's just get sysmon logs. So we see here that bacon.exe was indeed executed. We see the source IP of it. We see the destination IP. We know that the logs are working. Well, maybe now we want to see if something alerted, right? You can do all of these things. But in the interest of time, let's go into this shell. How are we doing time-wise? Yeah. All right, so let's go into the shell and let's shut down HTTP. So we shut that down. Now let's try the second one that we mentioned. The second one is HTTPS to an IP address. So again, we open it HTTPS. We show the campaign details. In this case, it's going to a different IP. So we have to clear the IP address, and we're going to run this with run DLL 32. So let's go back over to our victim system. Let's clear all this stuff. Open up Wireshark again. And now we know that it's going to call out to 35.229.19.7. So is there already an established connection? I'm thinking I do have some connection already established, but anyway, let's run this one with run DLL. So again, we look at our run books, we go to our desktop, and we're going to do run DLL 32.exe. We're going to run bacon.dll as this is T218, right? This is one of the other MITRE attack techniques. Let's see if there's any visibility here. So we ran that. We can go over and see if that worked. Yes, it did. HTTPS IP is over here, and we see a new active process on this, on process ID 332. Now let's go back over to Splunk. Let's refresh this. Let's see if we find this particular one. Here we see run DLL 32. Why is run DLL 32 reaching out to the internet, right? So we have some sort of communication, right? And something that you might want to do, some alert that you might want to turn on is run DLL going out to the internet is probably not a good thing, but at least our logs are getting there. Everything we're executing from this target system is getting over here. So I'm actually going to speed this up and let's straight to HTTPS for APT 33. Let me copy this. So in this case, we can just, should I do PowerShell? Let's do let's double click it because we don't have that much time. So I'm going to double click APT 33. And now this one's a lot more fun because we're going to see a lot of things that are going on. So for instance, it steals from the clipboard. This is typing some really sensitive things that and I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to copy it as well. Same thing. We go back to campaign list. We see APT 33 is active. We can show this to the blue team as we're executing. We can say, look, it's currently running. It loaded print screen, and look at that. It took a print screen of the target system. Would we be able to detect this TTP? This is T113. What about running Who Am I? In this case, I ran Who Am I, and we see that we're actually an admin user, and it's going through and loading things. Right now, it's loading the clipboard. Again, all of these are various. There's our clipboard. This is me typing, and it goes through every 5 seconds. It gets a new keylogger right now, so we probably let's type more things so that the keylogger grabs it and shows it for this awesome demo that hasn't failed. Did I just jinx it? And it goes through and it does all these things, right? I ran sysinfo, we're showing that. All of these are TTPs. Again, they are mapped back to attack. So as it goes through that, we will jump back into our presentation. So now someone asked about Vector, and I love Vector. We actually just recorded 2 days ago a Security Weekly, which will go live soon. And I want to show you what we've been working on. So Vector is an excellent, excellent tool for tracking and seeing improvements on these exercises. So, so I ran through a whole bunch of stuff. Now, let me show you how cool this is. We go to reports, we download this APT 33 report. We go here into Vector. We're going to create a new one called APT. Actually, let's call it Purple Team Workshop. PTEF. We're going to create a new assessment, and then we're going to import the logs that I just downloaded. The logs from this, exactly this report. So it's importing that. We submit this. Here's APT 33. And this is an import of the CSV that we just ran straight into Vector. And look how it breaks this up by the different things that you did. In this case, we did a lot of discovery, as you saw, but it also did some execution and some collection of things like clipboard, keylogger, print screen, etc. So it has it all there for you. And then down here, it has each and every one of these various items of what was executed. So we can go into each of these in real time and say, run DLL, or I don't know, I'm just going to pick one, input capture was indeed detected by Sysmon. and it did not have an alert. And the defenses here were endpoint protection. And we can add various detection information, etc. And we can see here that that has matched, right? So instead of spending the time going through and creating manual test cases for each of these, which would have required us to go here, new campaign, APT33, no template, save, and then creating a new test case, manually run DLL32, exe, etc., etc. We can just import the log file and have this beautiful, all these various campaigns. So in this case, Orange Worm, for instance, does everything off the land, just lives off the land. It's actually quite interesting. You have them all there. So you definitely want to do something that that logs everything. In this case, we did a ransomware. You see defense evasion, command and control, execution and impact, all logged here, all imported. And this allows you to track everything a lot better. So use Vector. There is Scythe and Vector integration, as you saw. Then share the screen if the TTP was identified. Document the various different results. Document what you need to work on. Vector is a great place to do all that. Make any short-term adjustments, and then move on to the next TTP. So we just did that for a variety of different test cases. We did HTTP, HTTPS, and APT33. And then you get to the lessons learned. So you should always have a dedicated exercise coordinator assigned. That way they can do all the management stuff, all the administrative things of getting the cyber threat intelligence, getting the approval of the sponsors, getting the proposal done, getting the reporting, taking notes, listing action items, obtaining feedback, sending daily emails, right? So the sponsors, don't leave them in the dark. If you're doing a 2 or 3 day or longer exercise, send them an email at the end of that day and say, today was a super productive day. It was so valuable. We ran through these. We actually identified some of these TTPs. We were able to block anything going out to an IP address. We were able to detect when you use run DLL32 and go out to the internet. This is great. We're increasing our security posture. We're detecting a lot of things. But we also have these other things that we've documented we're going to have to work on in the short term. Tomorrow, we're going to be emulating BotTrap or ransomware, and we'll be going through this. So you do all of that. And then at the end, also get feedback from the attendees. Every time you run one of these, you're going to learn something new. So this is like exercise feedback or exercise lessons learned. Not exactly things for people, process, and technology, but more for your exercise and your further development of Purple Team exercises. And then create the lessons learned document that should be completed and given to the sponsors and the attendees. If you have action items, assign those action items correctly and keep doing this. Vector allows you to do and show some historical trending of these various different ones. So let me actually jump over to a different database and just, let me see if it's this one. We can go to reporting and we can show how we have done, let me find historical trending. We can show how as we do these Purple Team exercises, our first one, we had 22% coverage. We weren't blocking much. 118 TTPs were not detected. Then as we moved forward, that improved. And now we are detecting 48% of these TTPs. We're also testing more, right? We've tested a total of 765 different TTPs, and we're blocking 187 of them. It's a higher detection rate. It's really improving our people, process, and technology, right? So really using Vector helps tremendously from the metrics perspective, from the action item perspectives. And like I said, and we will soon release the next version of Vector, and you'll see it on Security Weekly. You'll see it early next week. will have integration where we can import these Scythe exercises straight into there. So lastly, to wrap up before we go to Q&A, I did use Scythe for this, and that's because Scythe is an enterprise platform for adversary emulation. Whether you're doing red team engagements and want to do a replay, do retesting, want to do the reveal, or for purple teaming. It allows you to execute the same thing multiple times consistently and accurately. More importantly, it actually emulates this. You don't have to deploy some agent ahead of time. You double click the executable, you can send a phishing email, you can run DLL, you can do PowerShell, which I know I didn't show you, but I did give you the script to do it. And it will do it consistently every time. If we want to test this TTP again, what do? We literally go back to this system and we double click it again, and it will execute again, and it will run through a second time. We can go over here to campaign list, go to APT33, and see that we now have another active session that is going through the exact steps again. That way, you're putting things in an attack chain. SDK, which means that you can create your own TTPs and share them with the community through the marketplace. Now, the marketplace is going to be an ecosystem where researchers and enterprise clients and consultants can all share these different TTPs. So we're not really going after exploitation, right? It's not bug bounty. It's more like TTP bounty. You're going to be able to share these TTPs with other folks, create these campaigns. The campaigns we already share in our community threats. So I didn't show that, but in our GitHub, you can see here various community threats. So APT33, the one I just ran, you can pull up right here. It's a JSON file, and it has all the steps for APT33 to be emulated, along with things like MITRE ATT&CK tagging, both to the tactic and to the techniques. So we're very excited about that. We have an event coming up. It's a free unicorn conference, our very own unicorn conference on August 20th. So do register. We have, it's going to be very purple team. We have Olaf, who created the threat hunting Splunk app, doing the first keynote. And then we have John Strand, who you might know from SANS, the owner of Black Hills Information Security and Active Countermeasures, doing the second keynote. We're also going to have a number of folks talking about modules that they have created. Like Tim Medine, for instance, is creating a Kerber roasting module. So he's going to talk about what Kerber roasting is, along with how to use that module so that you can test and see if in your organization there is any detections for things like Kerber roasting. So it's going to be a ton of fun. Do register, scythe.io/unicorn2020. And thank you all for your time. I left exactly 15 minutes for Q&A. So let me jump over to questions and answers and see what we got. Go ahead and ask. What is the key differentiator between red and purple teaming? So on a red team, you generally do, in a red team engagement, you're doing a zero knowledge engagement. That means the blue team analysts are not aware of the attacks that you're going to be doing. In a purple team, you still need red, right? Because how do you make purple? Red and blue. So the red team still does these TTPs, but they're showing them to the blue team. So that's the main difference between red and purple teaming. Both are important. So in that evolution, I'm not saying don't do any vulnerability scanning anymore or don't do any red team engagements. all of that is still important. Continue to pen test, continue to do all of that, and just continue to evolve. Thank you so much for a presentation. Purple Team is some exciting stuff. Yes, it is. Gorilla Hammer. I don't think that's your real name. Can you explain the difference between adversary emulation and simulation? Great question. So there's a lot of debate about this, but an adversary emulation is when we're taking the TTPs, the attacker behaviors, and we are actually doing and executing those behaviors on the target system. So as you saw here, I created a payload and I ran it in the environment. Simulation is when you are replaying and simulating, right? Just per definition, simulating something. So for example, you might have an agent installed on one system and an agent installed in another. And what you're gonna do is replay a malicious packet, right? A malicious PCAP from a real threat actor, just to see if your network controls are working. So simulation, agents talking to each other, requires you to deploy agents ahead of time. In emulation, you're actually dropping a new executable, as we showed here, through Run DLL, through PowerShell, through multiple ways, and you're actually executing those. Thoughts on report structure for this exercise? Yes, so reporting, definitely use Vector. I think that is the best. It's really saved me. So my experience with Vector started actually 2 to 3 years ago. Our red team had already been running for about 2 years, and our CISO came to me and said, look, I love the red team work. Again, he was very technical. I love all these TTPs and leveraging MITRE ATT&CK. It's the new thing. This is great. I definitely see this is where the industry is going. But how do I explain this to senior management? How do I explain this to the CIOs and to the board of directors? That's when I found out about Vector. And really, Vector has allowed us to do that because Vector has very easy things like pie charts. Senior management understands pie charts and line graphs that show how you are improving over time. If you drill down, there's very technical work on it, right? Every test case has different things, has different detections. You can have different test cases per endpoint detection, network detection, etc. So it's definitely use Vector for that. Can you try this exercise at home? What do you need? Yes, so if you're gonna do this at home, you need a lab environment. And that's where I mentioned Atomic Purple Team. They're gonna be doing a talk at DEF CON on day 3, so on Sunday. And there's also Atomic Purple Team on GitHub. That allows you to create your own lab in Azure, I believe is what they use. So you can create all this and run this on your own. You can also do it with virtual machines. The most basic way to start, though, would probably be the C2 Matrix Slingshot VM. Grab that Slingshot, that's one virtual machine. Then grab another system that will be your victim system and just start deploying C2s. The how-to.thec2matrix.com will show you how to go through that and hopefully get you started. So good question here. When you talk about the time it takes to run an engagement, so preparation time between 2 and 8 weeks, right? Because you saw like 60% of this conversation today, logistics was about setup. That takes the longest. Then the actual exercise, you can do an exercise in a few hours. You can do an exercise in a full day. You can do multiple days. The most I've seen is a 4 or 5 day exercise, but that's really based on what the requirements are. And that's why it's important to know what the goals are early so that you can meet those goals. How would you present to the management about the benefits of purple teaming while they are doing red team every year because of regulatory requirements? It's an excellent question. Actually, there is one regulatory requirement that actually specifically calls for a purple team replay, and that's the Monetary Authority of Singapore with the Associations of Banks of Singapore, MAS and ABS. They specifically call out that after doing a red team engagement, you do a purple team one, which is great. We hope, I believe Tiber EU will start doing that as well. You definitely should do that. What we ended up doing was 1 quarter, if you will, don't get hung up on the 3 months, but in 1 3-month period, we did a no knowledge engagement, a red team engagement. And then the other 3 months, we do a full knowledge, a purple team. And then we take turns doing that. And this a global organization, so it really depends. But it's really based on your needs. But yes, the purple team exercise can be smaller exercises. The next thing I'll be talking about is how to operationalize this. So exercises come first, where you get that culture of collaborating and showing that value. And then you're going to want to actually operationalize this so that you can do that a lot nicer. Let's check here. Scythe is great, but can Vector be used with other tools? Yes. And Vector is, you can add any attack tools you want. I'll show you that right now. If you go here to Vector, you got administration, vendors and tools. Here you have red teams and you have blue team tools. So you can add any product you want. So you can add any product here. And then of course there's a ton of products. And the products don't actually have to be a tool. They can be living off the land, like Net, right? Bloodhound is on there, Mimikat is on there, etc. So it comes with a lot, Metasploit, PowerShell, etc. And then of course you can add any tool you would like. Is there a version of Scythe available to consultants and MSSPs? Yes. The consulting license is very attainable. We actually want to partner with consultants so that they can use this on their customers. So just reach out to me and we can talk about that. We're also working on an MSSP model. So if you are interested, just reach out. We're definitely there for that. Can you export from Scythe a report with all commands and screenshots? Yes, you can. So within Scythe, you go to reports and you can pull a report here, which shows everything that was ran along with what times and everything. There's other reports such as mapping to MITRE ATT&CK. And the version we're releasing next week for Black Hat and DEF CON will actually have a JSON layer as well, so you can import it into Navigator. I've already actually downloaded a CSV, so you can use CSV as well. Putting that up. So here you can see everything that was ran through there. So excellent question. Are a lot of US companies adopting purple teaming? That's a great question. It's new, and a lot of organizations, so enterprise organizations, which are the ones that are adopting Scythe the most, they get it. They've had a red team for some time, and now they're going in and doing purple teaming because everyone has realized that these efficiencies work. It's not eliminating the red team. It's really just giving the red team a tool to help them focus on their research while replicating the same tests with Scythe. Smaller organizations might not even have an internal red team, and that's fine. You can actually use Scythe, and a blue teamer could be able to do this. So you can jump straight into doing purple teaming without actually having a blue team, because creating a new campaign is extremely easy. You select here what campaign you want, what C2 you want to use. If you want to do DNS, which is super slow, but it's good for long haul, HTTPS. And then here you can create whatever you want to run. So say you want to run Mimikatz, you just click here and you can see it has created this automation. If you want to map to MITRE ATT&CK, you go here and you literally choose what TTPs you want to run, and you add those steps right here, and that gets tagged. This one in this case was Atomic Red Team, as well as MITRE ATT&CK tagging. You can also add timing, and you can add decision making. So if I want to execute something because I'm on a domain, I can just do if the Mimikatz ran, then do this next step. And of course I would run some other steps. So you can create that logic, then you hit next, you start the campaign, and that's it. You have created a campaign just like the ones we have here. What do I think about Caldera? I think Caldera is a great tool, great initiative from the folks at MITRE, but it's something that you would only run in non-production. I don't know anyone that has executed in production. So if you have, definitely reach out to me. I would love to see how you implemented that. Is there a good resource to look for adversaries in various sectors? Yes, the MITRE ATT&CK site is probably the best starting point. You can go to Miter Attack and just go to the search function right up here on the top right. And let's say you're in energy. You just type energy and it will go through. You can see it spinning there. You can pick different ones. I did energy on purpose because I knew APT 33 was going to come up, but you can see APT 33, you can see sharpshooter, oil rig, APT 19, etc. So probably the best place to start. And with that, we're actually at the end of time here. So again, I want to thank you all for your time. Thank you for spending these 2 hours with me talking about Purple Team exercises. Hopefully you find the Purple Team exercise framework to be valuable. Please let us know. Tag us and follow us on Twitter at Scythe_IO and at George Urchiez. If you have any other questions, we will be doing an encore at DEF CON. So we will be doing this exact same talk in a couple of days on Saturday, I believe. So hopefully you come out and ask more questions there, and keep sharing this. Keep moving the industry forward. And if you have any questions about Scythe, we offer consulting services as well. If you would like help, if you'd like me to be the red team for your first Purple Team exercise, just reach out to us and we're here for you. So really appreciate your time and have a great day. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to our Purple Team exercise framework workshop. My name is George Urchiez, and we really appreciate you being here. The first question I always get, and someone actually already posted it, is, will this be recorded? The answer is yes. And are there slides available? And the answer is also yes.
everybody, and welcome to this lab on hacking web applications at DEF CON 2020. I hope you're equipped with a glass of beer or a cup of coffee. For me, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning running when we start this lab, so I'm still not decided really whether to grab the beer or the coffee. My name is Håkan Nore. I work for Cisco Systems as a technical solutions architect specializing on cybersecurity. In this lab you have a mission. You should free as many mice as you can, because the target of this attack is a company called LabRats, and they do, it's a pharmaceutical company, an enterprise, a global enterprise, and they do keep rats in cages for medical research. And this is a very cruel practice, and your mission is to hack into their web applications in order to set the mice free. Normal website today contains of several layers, everything from operating systems up to the application layer, and then you have of course databases, frameworks, etc. in the middle. To secure this is not easy. And the focus for this lab is actually the top layer here, the application, and exploit poorly written code. So this lab, I hope you all read the abstract, or even better, the lab guide. This is not about novel research. There's nothing new in this lab. It's more of a tutorial. It's not a challenge lab, so if you follow the lab guide, you will actually be able to complete this lab okay, and hopefully learn some stuff. So you are assumed to be able to read some short code snippets like HTML5, JavaScript, PHP, and you are assumed to have some understanding on how web server applications work. So these are some useful concepts that I assume you are familiar with: the HTTP protocol, HTML5, JSON, CGI, cookies, and SQL. You don't need deep level knowledge on any of those, but you need to have more or less of an understanding of how they all fit together. So in this lab we focus on the methodology and not the tools. So the only real tool we are actually using in this lab is a normal Firefox browser, where we're using the web developer tools. In order to access this lab, you need to use VPN, and for that, since I work for Cisco, we are using the Cisco AnyConnect client. And in the lab guide you have instructions on how to download that one, and it's super easy to install. And then you will be given credentials to access your lab environment. And in your lab environment you will go to Jumper via remote desktop, and from Jumper you will be able to reach Evil 2, which is a Kali Linux system, but most of the actual hacking will be done via Firefox from Jumper. You also have two clients on the inside, client A and client B, and there we will use them in order to have naive users clicking on emails that we send them. And the target of the attack is the server on the inside called M2 for mice management. So in lab 1 we are going to show that